Hello, welcome to the channel. I am trying something new today, treading into new waters. We are going to be talking about a subject that is controversial, and it's YouTube banning certain content. I have brought a friend along who I think has some great takes on some of these issues. You can introduce yourself if you like.
Hi, I'm Katie. I like to think and read about interesting topics like this, and it's fun to think about complex issues that aren't necessarily black or white, because that means you have to think, and that's kind of rare nowadays. So, let's do this.
Thinking and nuance, how dare you? How
Yes.
dare. So this is an article that I thought we would go through real quick and kind of just read it first, and then we both had different things we wanted to say about the subject. But this is an article from Vox, and it's called "YouTube Finally Banned Content from Neo-Nazis, Holocaust Deniers, and Sandy Hook Skeptics." So the video is probably already demonetized just because I said that. But oh, I didn't tell you this, Katie, but I have, well, you know this, I have bad eyesight. Would you mind reading the article, or would you want me to read the article? I just think you might read it faster and have to stop less than me. But it's up to you.
I don't mind to read it. Do you want like a overview or all the way?
I think we could just read it like all the way and then not necessarily stop and then just kind of break down things if we want to, just because people might be listening, and I kind of wanted to do this like maybe TYT style, or, um,
Okay,
you know, so,
for
yeah.
sure.
Okay, so you have the floor.
All right. YouTube is finally banning the content that promotes white supremacist views on its video platform, but it will still permit videos classified as borderline, which isn't clearly defined, as well as a host of other problematic content. The Google-owned platform said on Wednesday that it's updating its hate speech policy to prohibit videos alleging that a group is superior in order to justify discrimination, segregation, or exclusion based on their qualities like age, gender, race, caste, religion, sexual orientation, or veteran status. The company specifically said that this new policy would ban videos that promote Nazi ideology. It's also axing content that denies well-documented violent events such as the Holocaust, the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. This is the latest development in an ongoing debate among social media companies about how to handle discriminatory and hateful content on their platforms. YouTube claims that since 2017, it has reduced views of supremacist videos by 80% after limiting recommendations, comments, and shares on videos, though until now it's refused to remove such content altogether. In March, Facebook banned white nationalist and white separatist content on Facebook and Instagram. Twitter is reportedly researching how white supremacists and white nationalists use its service in an effort to decide whether to allow them on the platform. Motherboard, which has been tracking the issue at Twitter closely, reported in April that Twitter is hesitant to change its policies in part because some Republican politicians might be flagged by algorithms that identify and remove supremacist content. Well, in January, it started to limit recommendations for content it considers to be harmful misinformation, such as videos that promote the flat earth theory, promise a miracle cure for diseases, or spread 9/11 conspiracy theories in the U.S. It claims the change resulted in a drop in recommendations of such content by 50%. In May, it took down a video of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi that was altered so she appeared to be drunkenly slurring her words. Facebook, on the other hand, left it up.
Of course they did. Sorry.
On Wednesday, YouTube said it also continued efforts to reduce borderline content and to more frequently recommend videos with authoritative sources of information and voices. But what exactly borderline means to YouTube is vaguely defined. That makes it likelier that questionable content, including hate speech, will remain on the platform. YouTube has a long way to go in refining its policies, ensuring it is not propagating hate speech, supremacist views, and abuse. Only last week, Carlo Mazza,
I think it's
a Vox
masa, yeah.
writer,
Like masa, probably.
a Vox writer and host of the video series Strike Through, tweeted a supercut of clips showing how conservative YouTube host Steven Crowder has harassed him for 2 years on YouTube without facing consequences, including using racist and homophobic slurs in YouTube videos about him. Last fall, he was inundated with text messages calling him to debate Crowder, and he faced severe online harassment. The Verge has complete coverage. Quote, since I started working at Vox, Steven Crowder has been making videos after video debunking Strike Through. Every single video has included repeat overt attacks on my sexual orientation and ethnicity. And he lists an example. End quote. After YouTube looked into the matter, it decided Crowder's videos didn't violate its policies enough to remove the channel. It later said it had suspended the channel's monetization because a pattern of egregious actions had harmed the broader community, and it is against our YouTube partner program policies. As The Verge lays out, that means Crowder's videos won't be eligible for ads through YouTube's AdSense network, and it could also mean the channel's content won't be recommended.
We don't have to read the. There's two like tweets down here. I think they kind of sum up what they are in the next paragraph, so we can skip those.
For sure. Neil Mohan, the chief product officer at YouTube, spoke to Recode's Peter Kafka in May about the challenges of regulating the content on its platform while making sure it remains a space for diverse voices to be heard. He acknowledges it's a work in progress. It's a combination of things, right? One is, does a video actually violate our policies? Are our policies drawn in the right way? And we're consistently looking at our policies, including our hate and harassment policies. The second part is, are we detecting it quickly enough, or are we having an enforcement action on it quickly enough? And if so, what I would say to that is all three of those elements are evolving, and we're not perfect. We get better every day, but we're not perfect about them. Millions turn to Recode to understand how technology and the companies behind it are shaping our world, and what's at stake as we rely on technology more than ever before. Financial contributions from okay.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna stop you, but like that's just like shilling for Vox at the end there.
Yeah.
But thank you for reading that. And now that like Katie has talked enough for like the both of us, I'm so sorry I made you read that long ass article. I'm so sorry. Like
No worries.
yeah, but I did just kind of want to go through that for just some background. Would you like to just give your thoughts first, or would you like to have some time to breathe for a moment? What do you think?
Well, I think in summary, it is like speech is very, and the censorship of it is very much like, the Supreme Court justice said, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't, hate speech is not black and white. You know, inflection and intent can do a lot of things to move a message one way or another. So it's trying to trap water in a net.
Yeah, and of course all the subtleties of, you know, like inflection and tone and intent, like all of those just get lost in spaces like Facebook in a broader sense when you're just looking at text. It's a lot easier to identify it in videos, I think, like on YouTube, but even then it could be kind of difficult, I think.
Right.
I mean, like, if you take Steven Crowder, for example, who they mentioned in the article, like, I've watched Steven Crowder a lot just because I find him entertaining, and he's, you know, I'm a very left-wing person, but I like to watch conservative media just to get an idea of what their take on certain issues is, because I think if you're not having those conversations, it's very difficult to change minds. He is a person who he finds a lot of that rhetoric very amusing. So he's not seriously going out there and trying to, you know, send people after someone, I don't think. But on the other hand, it's like he thinks that stuff is inherently funny. And it's like he doesn't have that perspective of, okay, but you're actually perpetuating harm to people. When you, like, a lot of people don't find that inherently funny. Like when he does like a slur, it's like, haha, I'm joking. But it's like, to a lot of us, that's just like not funny. You know, so
Well, isn't that kind of like the former president talking up the people before the riot on the Capitol? I'll be behind you 100%. That he was giving a pep talk to them, and then he just like leaves.
yeah, you mean like with the plausible deniability type thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, or Alex Jones, he got sued. No, he didn't get sued. In order to keep custody of his children, in an attempt to get shared custody of his children, he said no intelligent adult would think that this was anything but satire. Fox
Mm-hmm.
News settled a lawsuit with Tucker Carlson's viewers about, well, this was not intended to be informative. It's satire. So you have to think about that angle where they're going to use plausible deniability, and well, any person who has just average intelligence would know that this isn't real or serious, or I was joking when I said it. But at the same time, they're feeding extremists. They're still handing out phone numbers and addresses. They're still radicalizing a whole generation of people.
Are you talking about like the base doxing people with like the phone numbers thing?
Yes.
Yeah. I've seen people do that, or I haven't seen people do that, but like I've heard of people doing that. And it is kind of interesting that you bring up the thing with like people saying it was satire or sarcasm. I mean, every time Trump said something that people didn't like, and he was confronted about it, he said it was sarcasm, and I was like, I don't think the president understands what sarcasm is. Sarcasm is when you're poking fun at a specific person, not like I said some dumb shit and now I'm walking it back and it was sarcasm, you know. But go ahead. Sorry.
But then they flip when they're the ones being harassed or doxxed, or otherwise their life is otherwise impeded by detractors or protesters. I don't quote me on this. I think it was Ted Cruz got asked to leave a restaurant in DC, and he's like, "This is discrimination. This is this. This is, you know." They go whine and cry
Mm-hmm.
when it's them and their families and their lives that are being upended. But when they're the cause behind the upheaval, it's like, well, anybody who has, half a brain would know I was just teasing. It was a joke.
Right.
But it's never a joke when you're the victim.
Right. Or like when like all those GOP senators who were just fine with Trump going out there and like stirring people up and inciting violence when it was other people getting roughed up, but the second like they came to the Senate, they were like, "Oh shit!" I was like, "No, that's we have to impeach him now." And it's like he's been doing this for years, and you guys didn't seem to care until just now because you were the one who was in danger for once.
Right.
Yeah.
And even before that, you can see that principle of that thinking, because we want every American to have the right and the freedom to have 16 AR whatevers and have a basement full of rounds and a full armory for every household. But you can't bring guns to our workplace.
Yeah, they have to speak, and it's like gun-free zones and stuff.
Yeah.
So, and
Like,
sorry, go ahead.
it's the double standard that inherently makes the rich richer and the poor poorer.
Yeah, and so I think that is one side of it here, and of course, I think when it comes to incitement of violence and harassment, you shouldn't be able to do that. And I think like with Steven Crowder, that's kind of a borderline example. I would think of like, okay, this is someone who's trying to do comedy, but at the same time, you are just using your platform to just bully someone and send people after them unintentionally or intentionally. And it's like, I had to sneeze. I'm sorry about that. Apologizing for sneezing. But I do think that there is a real harm, and I mean, like Katie's seen these notes that I sent to her already, so it's like I don't want to have it be like a news show. Like, that's right, Katie, I think this, but like, you know, so you know what my point's gonna be. But basically, what I'm saying is, I think it is harmful though to be deplatforming people in this way if they are just spouting these kind of hateful ideas. And I realize YouTube is a private company, but I do think it is harmful. And my thought process is, like, I get where people are coming from, right? Because we don't want to see this in our daily lives. Like, I know what it's like to be attacked for your identity and, like, who you are, and it just feels fucking horrible because it's like people don't even accept you for the things you can't control. It's like your whole existence is just a joke to them, and like that just hurts, and you don't want to see that in your feed every day. And like I get that, right? But I also think that I guess I'll give an example this way. I had never seen, and I don't think I've told you this actually, Katie. I'd never seen a white nationalist before, like say any point or like go into any of their spaces before. I'd only ever seen white nationalists talked about in like anti-white nationalist circles, and obviously I'm in the anti-white nationalist camp, but like I think people really can change their minds. I think people do evolve, and there are real like problems with the human mind that make us default to a lot of these racist things, like, oh, I have a problem, I want to blame somebody, let me blame this other group, right? But if you, oh, I almost tipped my computer over. If you come at it from this angle of like, I'm just going to knock this person off of this platform, and you don't actually try to have those conversations, like if I ever meet a white nationalist in real life, like since I've listened to some of what they said, okay, it's like, okay, I still think they're wrong, but at least I know where they're coming from. And I think if you just come at this from the angle of like, all right, you can't even speak on this platform, it's just going to make them feel like martyrs, and it's going to make them go into other spaces where there aren't people there who can help change their minds. You know, so, and obviously like incitement of violence and harassment, like I said, those are two things that I think are crossing the line. You can't just have people organizing violence on a platform. But shy of that, I mean, I do think even racist content should be allowed on YouTube for that reason. Now, them taking it out of the recommendations, I totally agree with that. Like, you know, YouTube can totally be like, oh, well, fuck you, I'm not going to put you in my recommended. I'm not going to be bringing new people on board to your content. But like, you know, I think just taking it off can be harmful. What do you think about that, basically?
Well, I think that we have to think about the people who are already in it and giving them a sense of martyrdom and persecution. That's going to put more fuel to their passion. And it's also, this is kind of a rabbit trail, but it's going to radicalize a whole new generation for that cause. Because how do you get a kid to do something? Tell them not to do it. Tell them it's wrong, or it's edgy, or it's forbidden. So, you know, I went through a bit of a gothic phase, and it was because my mom was very puritanical, and it was just an act of rebellion. Right. So if
you okay?
Yes.
Okay.
If we tell a generation of people who are increasingly on the internet most all of the day that this is wrong and bad and terrible, that's the first thing they're going to gravitate to. It's like, oh, what's that? And then I think combined with other social pressures that are in that we are immersed in, like you said, I need somebody to blame for my problems. That's not me.
Like the out group, basically.
Yeah, young white men are perfect targets for a sexist, racist group of people, older white men who are more than happy to mentor them in this this tradition of hate and otherness. So rather than deplatform them or silence them or drive them to the interwebs where they can't get, that they're out of, any sort of reach of a different opinion, I think we should take a Daryl Davis approach. I watched his TED Talk recently again for like the millionth time. He is a jazz piano player, and he helps convert KKK members, not by preaching at them or yelling at them or doing anything forceful, but just sitting down with them and being their friend.
Is
talking
he
to them.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think I know. Is he a black man, kind of a bigger guy?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, and he's the guy who like he had his friend, like he had a friend, and like his friend gave up his KKK robes.
Yes.
Yeah. I know.
Of robes that former KKK members have given him after they renounced it because a black man was kind to them. A black man made them think about what they were doing, about what they were spewing, about what they were saying. And they're like, I can't do this. I'm out.
Yeah, that's a great example. And just backing up a bit, I mean, I do think racism is a big problem in this country. Still, I know a lot of people think it kind of doesn't exist anymore, which is horseshit. I don't want to prejudge anyone. I mean, I know that like there is a lot of hate that can be, exploited with, like they say, like the white working class person, like they, like with Trump voters and stuff like that. Not that Trump voters are inherently racist or anything, but I do think that like as far as like the things that lead us to prejudice, this is something that all of us humans share. It's just they see it in different ways, and I think since white people have a lot more power in this country, we tend to see it from a lot of white people. But that's not like, I don't think white people are just inherently more racist or anything. I just think in our particular system, that kind of systemic racism, it shows itself a lot more through racism that exploits and like puts down non-white people. So I would add that caveat to that.
Right.
But I think that is a great example because it's like, and some people are bad people, right? Some people it's just like, fuck you. I'm not going to sit here and say every single person is redeemable. Like if you're just like a whole ass terrorist out killing people, I'm honestly, you should just go to jail, right? So,
Right.
But I do think we have this kind of shouty caps way of dealing with things now, where it's like we're letting our emotions get in the way of what's actually pragmatic about this. Because if you think back to like, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but were you familiar with like the YouTube atheist scene back like in 2005, 2009, like those years when YouTube atheism was like really popular?
No. I was still firmly encroached in my youth group.
Okay. Well, I mean, I was too, but I've gone back and looked at a lot of them, and I would see it from time to time. But I'm bringing it up because, like, back in the day when YouTube was basically a free market of ideas, to sound like Dave Rubin, it was, for better or for worse, pretty much anything could survive on YouTube unless it was really bad back then. I mean, there were some things on YouTube that made it on YouTube that probably should not have been on there, but it's like there was a lot more like Christian content back then that was just like, not trying to be relevant to the pop culture and anything, just straight up hardcore Christian content. And that's back when we had the video response on YouTube. And YouTube atheists would just kind of counter these things that they would find on YouTube, and like, CNN or whatever. And they basically just took off. And kind of we won. You know what I mean? Like on YouTube, and TJ Kirk pointed this out too, the Amazing Atheist. He was saying like, back in the day, all the comments that were opposing him were like, fuck you, God is real, Jesus is his son. Nowadays the comments are like, hey, of course we don't believe in God, but stop being so mean to religious people. It's like, in that space, people really don't take religion seriously anymore, because for every crazy, like, radical religious video, there was someone like the Amazing Atheist coming along being like, no, this is what we think. And we kind of won that way, you know? And I think, like, if YouTube would have been like, no, we're going to take all the crazy religious videos down, I don't know that that would have helped a whole lot. You know? I don't know that that actually would have helped with, you know, countering those actual ideas rather than just putting it all in the open and letting people see it and be like, oh, well, this is dumb. Let's not be that, you know? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that YouTube and social media in general, they're kind of like that parent who doesn't want their kid to fail, so they don't let their kid do anything. So it's like, oh, we don't want this, no, don't say this, play it safe, or in any sort of, rock the boat content is going to be closely monitored and looked at and critiqued for your safety.
Right.
Well, so we have to consider, what are we willing to give up for our security? Or are we willing to, how much free speech are we willing to give up in order to be safe from ideas that may upset us, that may offend us, that may challenge what we believe or what we think?
Yeah, and I think the public is kind of thinking that way too. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because it does lead to another point, which is I think the public, when I was talking about like wanting to counter bad ideas and hurtful ideas and harmful ideas, like I think that's what the public is doing. I don't think YouTube actually cares about these things. I think if tomorrow YouTube found out that white supremacist content was like super popular with most people in this country, they'd be like, all right, it's fine. Like, they're just trying to make money. They're like, every time that something happens that scares the advertisers, it punishes the rest of us, because then they just become like these people who are like radically taking everything down that might scare the advertisers away. And I think that's another part of it that's super annoying, and it does kind of go into the whole quote-unquote cancel culture thing too, because they're afraid that people are going to get public backlash on Twitter if they see like their ads on something that's hateful. So I don't necessarily think YouTube is acting in good faith, but I think the people who are kind of driving the conversation in the public space are acting in good faith. I understand where they're coming from. Like, I'm not sitting here saying they're ruining the country and they're going to do this and that. Like, I get why they want the content to be gone. I'm just not sure that taking it down and forcing it underground is going to be good in the long run. You know what I mean?
Right. But another angle to look at it is this could inspire the next YouTube, the next Twitter or Facebook. What was the conservative Facebook?
Oh, I know what you're talking about. And one of my friends actually just told me what the title of this was, and I forgot. But
Parler.
Parler, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, when people are pushed into a corner, whether they be neo-Nazis or people who want to think for themselves, like everyday normal people, then it's going to get somebody annoyed enough to do something about it.
Well, right. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
And like, YouTube was not the ad, it was not always the ad every 2 minutes platform that it is now.
No.
It wasn't always the revenue generating media that it is now. It was very basic for quite a while, but it was, like you said, it was just free thinkers, and it was, hey, this is my opinion, this is your opinion, let's talk about it and let the public decide. It was an ongoing debate of ideas. So everybody's going to have that cringy sort of beginning, and it's not going to be glamorous or pretty or shiny, but it's going to be authentic. And I think that now is the time where we're going to develop another
platform where we can be authentic with each other, especially as more and more people are working from home, more and more people are on the internet, and as small groups from both sides of the spectrum are making enough noise to scare the advertisers, like you said, whether it's on YouTube or CNN or Fox News, all three of those companies, they have in common money. This is a this is a revenue generating business. We are in it for the money. So we're going to go where the money takes us. We're going to talk about what the viewers want us to talk about. So if we can create another platform where we don't have to worry about advertisers, we don't have to deal with, well, what do the investors say? We're going to have that revival of thought and opinion and education. It's going to be a renaissance for free thinking.
Yeah, and that is a good thing, but the issue is with like Parler is it was mainly the far right people who got annoyed enough to leave. And they got annoyed because of the censorship. So like I've thought for years that like there should be something else besides YouTube, because YouTube just become like a place run by, I'm sorry, corporate hacks who just who just try to take everything down that is somewhat unpopular. But it's gotten to the point now where the people who left were, the ones who are now creating another echo chamber that's arguably even worse, because I don't think they allow left-wing stuff on that platform. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think it's overwhelmingly an echo chamber for right-wing people now, and which YouTube and Facebook weren't before, which is what I liked about them. Actually, I want to know what you think about this. Can we address this whole thing of thinking that because someone has an ad on something, they endorse that thing? I've never understood that. I always thought and maybe this is just because I'm American, but I always thought if I saw an ad on something, it's like, okay, cool. You're not maybe the worst person, but, here's, we'll have it just like a mutual agreement. I'll give you some money, you have the ad on the video, and it's just kind of a partnership. I never thought that like the advertisers had to skim through every single thing that they had ads on and be like, do we like this? Do we not like this? I never really thought of ads that way. And apparently a lot of people do think of ads that way, because that's why adpocalypse could even happen, was because a lot of people were like, oh no, ads are on this video. That's pretty much just automatically put, the ads are pretty much put on there automatically. But a lot of people apparently didn't know that or care about that, and that's why adpocalypse even happened on YouTube. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Genetically Modified Atheist had a video on that, actually, because he got so many comments and emails about how his videos were preceded by Christian advertisements.
Yeah. Oh, are you talking about Genetically Modified Skeptic?
Yes.
Okay.
And he's like, I have no control over that. They buy ad space for the hashtags, and I happen to be one of those hashtags, so it happens. So by flagging the content or associating the content with the ad that it's connected to, especially on YouTube, that's a very far leap to make.
Yeah.
To correlate the two.
Yeah, and like I can understand people saying, well, if it's like a video advocating violence or something, then we shouldn't have ads on that. But I'm like, well, those videos shouldn't be on YouTube in the first place, right? So why would it be a problem? I guess you could say, your ads are propping up hateful content if they're on these videos, but it's like like I said, it's just a thing where you find videos that are popular and you put ads on them. It's just like TV channels. I don't think if there's a commercial before Will and Grace that like back in the day that like all those companies were super like pro LGBT. They just happened to be on the same network in the same ad space.
Right.
I mean, maybe
It's,
I'm just a super capitalist in my thinking, but I've just always kind of thought that way, you know?
well, I think it's there's some blame to lay at the feet of the public
Mm-hmm.
because left wing, right wing, middle of the aisle, wherever you are politically or socially or you know internally, we are really good at getting offended. And social media, for better or for worse, gives us a platform to tell the world how we feel at any given second.
Mm-hmm.
So before, people would write in their diaries or they would write a letter to the newspaper. And there was time to think about, the initial outrage and it was just, you had time to internalize and process your ideas and opinions before the entire world knew what you were thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think we see a lot of that coming back to bite us in the ass when we look at all the celebrities who've been blacklisted for a homophobic tweet they made 17 years ago or something that they said, crazy long ago.
Mm-hmm.
The internet remembers everything, whether we want it to or not. And when people treat their social media platforms like their diaries, that's a very, very bad combination because people evolve. But, and so, they may not think that homophobic thing that they thought in 2007.
Yeah.
But somebody can go back and say, ooh, you said that in 2007. I'm not going to give you a job in 2021.
Right. Yeah. And I don't want to conflate here, like, there are people who've done horrible things in the past. And there are also people who will jump to their defense and say, it was a long time ago. It's like, well, I'm sorry. If you're like a predator or something like that, like I don't think that's forgivable. Right. But
Yes.
if you made a joke about something, even if it was a highly offensive joke, and it's, a lot of times people will either come out and apologize for something, and like that's not even good enough for people. And I mean, I'll probably catch some shit for this, but like, for example, back in the day, Jimmy Fallon did like a blackface joke, but it wasn't really it was more like he was like, I think he was impersonating Chris Rock, right?
Yeah.
Or Chris Tucker. I don't remember. I used to get Chris Rock and Chris Tucker mixed up. The two funny Chris's. He was doing an impression, and like, I think at the time, even the guy who he was impersonating thought it was funny. And like, yeah, that's something you wouldn't do nowadays because it has a lot more implications that a lot of people didn't think about back then. But it's just like, Jimmy Fallon being like, I'm so horrified that I did this. I'm like, it probably was offensive to a lot of people back in the day, but it's like, it was supposed to be edgy, like, and especially when you think about like jokes where the actual joke is that it's offensive, that like, oh, this is so insensitive, I can't believe someone would do this. When you have jokes like that, and people are having to apologize from all these years later and getting canceled for it, I just don't really agree with that. But like bringing it back to like the social media where you're talking about with like people having instant access to voice their rage, and also everyone knowing what they think immediately, and that being kind of juxtaposed with them having their thoughts from 17 years ago be out there right away. A lot of these things, I'm not trying to make it sound like I support what people are saying necessarily. Like sometimes people say things that are offensive. Sometimes people say things that are just jokes. Even in the case of someone saying something racist, like just overtly racist, a lot of that content I do find despicable, and I hate it. But I'm mainly just worried about we're not accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish. I don't think. Like I think what we're trying to accomplish is living in a world where we actually have addressed in public debate a lot of these ideas, and the amount of people who subscribe to these racist ideas or xenophobic ideas is reduced. And I think a lot of these companies think, or a lot of the public thinks, that you can just remove it from easy view and it goes away. But that's like hacking at the branches of evil. You know, it's not how it works. You have to actually address the problem.
Right. And by driving them into deeper, darker corners of the web, or giving them a sense of of persecuted martyrhood, it makes them, coming from a formerly coming at it from the perspective of someone who is formerly religious, from very religious.
Mm-hmm.
It gives, the more flack you get, the more you feel like, I'm onto something, man. I'm pushing buttons. I'm making people think. They're just pushing back against what they know is right.
Yeah, like the contrarian mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're giving all of the things that you don't want in a society: hate, xenophobia, racism, sexism, all the isms and ists. You're giving them free advertisement. You're giving them free propaganda. You're giving them free material to use to recruit other people, when you could do something a little bit more difficult, but you could talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there are Facebook, you and I are part of a Facebook group, and we have moderators. People can post whatever they want, and if that content is bad, offensive, or otherwise against the rules, then it's going to be taken down, or that person's going to get a warning. But it's not like we have to jump through 17 hoops to get something, to share something with our group.
Yeah,
but there are still rules, there
Mm-hmm.
are still guidelines, but there's still freedom. And there's that sense of balance between, I'm going to say what I would like to say, but I'm also not going to be a dick.
Yeah, I do very much believe in, there. It kind of, it's different for different things, because like in a lot of Facebook groups, you're in a smaller setting. It's not really considered like a public thing where we're just, censoring a certain kind of person and not somebody else. There are things that help a group be more civil, for example. And then there are things that kind of come from the top down with, the moderators and stuff like that, where people are, agreeing to a certain set of values before they join a group and stuff. But I think like with something like YouTube, it should be treated more like public access. Now, I know a lot of people on the left want to like basically seize YouTube and Facebook and treat them as public utilities. I don't really agree with that. I mean, I don't think that if you become too successful, that they should just take your platform away from you, for example. But I think like it is a little bit different in those scenarios, because you have this platform where it's, even though it's not a public utility, it kind of is treated as one. Like if you want to, like if you're a news network and you want to share your ideas or you want to share your videos, you're going to post them on YouTube. Where else are you realistically going to post them where people are going to get that kind of viewership? So it's like, I do think public groups are kind of, or private groups, I do view them a little bit differently sometimes. For example, like, people are not allowed to attack people personally, because that just creates a hostile environment. I mean, I think of it more like a workplace, right? Like, if you walk up into like a work office and you're just like saying some neo-Nazi shit, like, yeah, I'm probably gonna make you leave because it's like a smaller space. But like, it's almost like public land when it comes to YouTube. It's like I would never want to just tell someone, no, you have to get out and leave. So I realize it is a little more like complex and arguably kind of using a double standard there, but I don't really think it is, because I think size of the platform has a lot to do with it too. Like
That's a fair point.
Thank you. Yeah. And I hadn't really thought about that, but I'm glad you kind of brought up that juxtaposition because, like, yeah, in private Facebook groups, like, yeah, your ass can get in the chomper a lot easier, than I would like on something like Facebook or like Facebook, like, or YouTube or something. I mean, and that's one of the things that annoys me too is just when people are like, it's like I don't understand why somebody clearly like agrees to something before they join something. They're like, okay, I want to attack people personally. And then, like, the first thing they say is, shut up, bitch. And I'm like, well, nah. But it's like YouTube, though, what they'll do is it's been going for so long. A lot of these people on YouTube, they got on there back when the rules weren't so strict. Or sometimes, like, TJ Kirk just got flagged for something because they imparted these new rules on him but they didn't warn him beforehand. They didn't give him any warning. So, like, he basically didn't have, like, he doesn't have future vision, and that's why he got penalized.
Right.
It's I think, yeah, so that for that reason I think it is very different because it started out so much freer and it's gotten so much bigger, that enough eyeballs are in front of it now that if you just start taking away certain content, that it does feel like persecution versus, like, I think a small Facebook group, like, people aren't necessarily going to feel persecuted and, like, everyone's against them. If a group says, from the beginning, you can't say racist shit, and then they say racist shit and then get kicked out, So.
Yeah.
Not that was, like, supposed to be some big defense.
Like,
no,
that was a good perspective.
Yeah, well,
Because, I mean, we can get to the point where we reduce it to such simplistic terms that it's no longer applicable, and it's more of a hope and dream and aspiration that it is an applicable theory or applicable model.
Yeah. And I guess I'll just say this for full disclosure because it's kind of out in the open now. Just because this is a more private channel, I won't say exactly what group we're in. I won't give the name away, but and a lot of people from the group probably will be watching this if I post it. But I am one of the more libertarian people when it comes to, like, I've been a moderator in, like, several groups, and I'm usually very libertarian. But, like, as a group moderators, we do kind of all have to be on the same page. A lot of times we vote on things, but, like, most of the time, I'm not in favor of kicking someone out if they think hateful things. But I do realize, too, that some groups serve specific purposes. So, like, we're not always all on the same page either about who should be kicked out and who should be allowed to stay. So I'll just say that. But, different issues have different things. Sometimes I'm like, oh, man, this person should be kicked out. And they're like, no. And then sometimes they're like, this person should be kicked out. And I'm like, no, they shouldn't. So, diverse opinions, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you brought up something interesting, kicking people out, whether it be figuratively or literally, whether it be your business establishment, a private group, or a public forum. That can be a traumatic experience.
I'm sorry, you cut out. It can be a what?
That can be a traumatic experience.
Right.
And,
yeah.
I mean, maybe that person and their opinion is incorrect or wrong or harmful. But how are they going to know or evolve if we just boot them out? If we shun them, and instead of saying, you're wrong, you're bad, go away, we don't want you anymore, there's a better way of changing hearts and minds, and that's by engaging with them, not giving their ideas, not propagating their ideas as, well, that's a valid point to consider.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they're actively pushing to denigrate or make another group inferior, yeah, that's wrong. That needs to stop. There has to be a baseline of standard. But at the same time, that person is an individual. At one point, we're all going to be wrong about something. So if the solution is to unilaterally kick somebody out for being wrong, well, we're all fucked.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that goes to a whole broader point of, like, everyone likes the rules when they're in charge, but as soon as someone else gets in charge, it's not so fun anymore. But that's why, like, I'm almost always in these kinds of spaces. If we're talking even just like groups on Facebook, I'm in favor of, like, I will kick someone out or mute someone for their actions, but not their opinions. Usually, like, that's just kind of usually how the way I roll. Because, like, the personal attacks thing, for example, the reason someone shouldn't be engaging in personal attacks is because it's just going to destabilize the group. Basically, we can't have conversations that people are just like, your mama's so fat and you're a dumb bitch and like, that's not a good way to engage. That's just engaging in bad faith. That's not an argument. That's just an ad hominem. So, those. Well, I guess it's not necessarily insults aren't necessarily ad hominems, fallacies, but it's an attack on that person, right?
Right.
But if you're just like, if you think some dumb stuff, like, it depends on how you're engaging. To me, that's usually the way I roll, and I think that's kind of my attitude for YouTube as well. It was like, you're allowed to have bad ideas, I think, but you're not allowed to be like, hey, let's go beat up these people. Like, you can't do that. Not to compare insults with actual violence, but you get what I'm saying. I don't have to beat this dead horse. But I'm glad you brought that up, though, because, like, I hadn't really thought about it in those terms before. And I was afraid I was going to do that thing sometimes when I'm recording where I stop talking because I just have to think. And God forbid I stop talking to think, because that would be horrible, right? It's like it's like when someone makes you think, you're like, oh shit, she's right. My whole life is a lie. But,
well, and I think about the way you engage, like you said, is a very big contributor to what the consequences are to your wrong or uninformed or ill-conceived opinion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you are convinced that this is the right thing to do, that this is the right way to think and to create and to base a society on, and you are convinced of that, then let's talk about it. Why do you believe what you believe?
Yeah.
Tell us what you believe and why, and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But if you're going to preach at somebody, if you're going to proselytize, or you're going to propagate something that has no leg to stand on, well, here's the comment section, sir, madam. Let's, proceed to be torn apart.
Yeah. Comments are turned off on this video. I hate that shit. God damn it.
So, if you tell me your opinion, be ready for my opinion.
Yeah. I hate when I'm sorry. I hate when I'm watching, like, a long video that I'm like, oh, all this is bullshit, and I go to comment on it and it's just no comments. Like, they don't want, like you said, they don't want your opinion. They only want to tell you theirs.
Right. And I think that's where the art of debate should come back. Because the art of debate is not for the two debaters. It is not aimed towards them. It's aimed toward the audience. I'm going to watch this creation versus evolution debate. I've watched several of those. It's the first thing I thought of. Well, I have my opinions. Everybody else has theirs. I'm watching this debate in order to be more informed about my own opinion and the facts and the consensus. And what's the plural of consensus? I don't know. Anyway.
Consensus?
Consensi?
Consensi.
Well, and to see what everybody else thinks, to broaden my education and social horizons. I'm doing that in good faith. I am opening myself up to being offended or incorrect in something that I think or believe, and open to changing that as the facts and evidence direct.
Yeah.
As long as, and if everybody in the audience of a debate does that, well, they're going to walk away with something to think about, something to chew on for a while. Well, I believe this, but they made a really good point. I'm going to think about that. And that's how we evolve as people in a society. I mean, the Greeks and the Romans, they would sit and talk about philosophy, and that's how philosophy was born.
Right.
It was like
formal philosophy. Yeah.
Right, and it wasn't without its bumps. It wasn't without its errors or, sticky spots. It probably wasn't a pretty process, but what came out of it is beautiful and engaging, and we need to be willing to be uncomfortable to create something beautiful.
Yeah. I think, I mean, and just to caveat, people have been consensizing for a long time.
I think we just created some words here.
Yeah. I think I I made a mistake. No, but, it's kind of that's when it was more like formal, I think, and we have a good record of it, but I'm sure people were doing that stuff for a long time because we're humans. Permission to disagree with you about something. We might have a little bit of a sticking point here, actually, and I think I think I might have touched on this before. I do not like the way that Matt Dillahunty engages with people at all. He's one of the people that would get kicked out of my group, like almost immediately, because it's just because the thing is, I watch Matt Dillahunty's videos. I mean, I've watched like his personal videos, and he's very good about welcome to the atheist debates, and like this is how we handle this issue, and he's like a completely different guy. He's like Jesus when it comes to debating people, but then he turns into Satan on his podcast because he has that audience there, and he's always trying to entertain them, and like he won't let people get a word in, and he'll be like insulting them and be like and just like jumping down their throat every time they get something wrong, and I'm like, why is this guy in charge? He just irritates me so much because he's so smart. He knows what he's talking about. But he's a fucking dick when it comes to debating people on the phone,
I think a lot of that comes from the fact that he's been doing it for so long. He's heard all of the fallacies and the arguments, and for some reason there's still people in 2021 calling to defend biblical slavery. And that just frustrates the ever-loving shit out of him. Mm-hmm. And it just unleashes that monster of, shut up, you're wrong, and here's why, be quiet.
Katie, no, it wasn't slavery. It was indentured servitude. Because it says in there that it says that you have to let them go. And he's like, no, it doesn't say that. It clearly says you can keep them if they're from foreign nations, which is also racist. But anyway.
Yes.
I get that, I get that, but like I used to be a camp counselor, right? And what we would do is every first day of the week, we would get new campers, and we would always call it day one, no matter which week it was, because we had to keep in mind that every single camper who comes in here, like every single camper group, it's their first day, right? We can't think like this is week 5. No, it's their first day. We have to treat it like it's like, and I think he should do that too. A lot of people, this is their first time calling in, and it's like, that guy didn't let me finish a sentence, and he was a fucking dick, and I'm sorry if I just interrupted you, Katie, because that just went against my point. But yeah, well, I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
Well, no, I agree with you. I mean, when you do something for long enough, you lose the perspective that not everybody knows everything you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do that with healthcare because I work in healthcare. My friend does that with tech support because he works in tech support, and you lose you sometimes forget to remember that not everybody knows everything you do, but the beautiful turnaround of that is you don't know everything that everybody else knows. So by sharing your experiences and ideas and engaging with other people, you get to partake of the experiences of everybody around you. And that makes you a better person, and that makes everybody else better people, because we're all in this together. Like a true humanist, it's the collective going forth, trying to make the world a better place, trying to learn something new, trying to be better versions of ourselves.
Right, and that's why it drives me crazy when he says we're here to promote positive atheism, because positive atheism is such a good thing, but it's gotten to the point where it's like his live audience are the only people he's trying to go to validate him. And you'll notice whenever I know this is just like an expose of Matt Dillahunty now, but like when, whenever like someone calls in who says they're an atheist, watch his face. He immediately gets more friendly. Like it's instantaneous. He's like, okay, you're an atheist. What do you want to talk about, buddy? Can I buy you some chocolates? Would you like some warm milk? Can I rub your back? And it's like, oh my god, Matt, no. Why are you like this? It's just like, he's just, I don't know. And you can see people that he's working with trying to not be like him, and he's like, I'll let you talk now. And then he just dominates the conversation. He's just one of those me monsters. You know what I'm talking about? Like when people just...
That's fair. But I also think that he is, for lack of a better word, entitled to a certain amount of grandfathered inness, because we all have every group has founders, and I think that you and I have talked about this before, but as a movement or a social change begins, you're going to have those pioneers, and they're going to be the ones to pave the way, and they had it really rough, and they had to start out on their own, and they didn't have all the resources that they helped create. Like freedom from religion, that was created by somebody who had to go at it on their own.
You mean like the Freedom from Religion Foundation?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when I think that the people, not to say that you're wrong, because I do think you have valid points on how Matt engages with people, but we have a lot of resources at, questioning believers as well as new atheists. We have a lot of resources that the older ones never had. And so there's a little bit of bitterness and anger that comes with that, being alone for so long. So like Richard Dawkins and Hitchens, they're all firebrands, and we love to watch the videos and just cheer them on, but they have a little bit of anger, a perma angry atheist in them, because they helped pave the way for humanists to say, let's love everybody, let's have tolerance and peace and joy,
right.
When nobody shat on a lot of the newer atheist movements and the newer secular social movements. But at the beginning, I can't imagine how rough it was. I mean, people had to choose between their entire lives and being honest with themselves. And that's got to take a psychological toll. So while I don't agree with how he engages with theists, I kind of see where he comes from, because our experiences shape us as people. And sometimes I think we hold on to it in little micro bits, and it just shows at certain points in our lives. And for Matt, I think it shows when he engages with a particularly thick-headed theist caller, which happens most of the time.
Right. And I'm so glad you brought up Richard Dawkins, because I'm so glad you did that, because I just wanted to you brought up so many interesting things. First of all, I'm going to say my on the nose comment here. Hey, Matt, see how I just let her finish what she was saying? It's okay to do that sometimes. You can do that. But, but it's like, no, I do like get why there might be a little more bitter, but I don't think there are any hierarchies in like atheism. I mean, like I don't like the idea of like Emperor Matt Palpatine. It's like he laid down, he's just sitting there like, do it. Like I don't really like that idea here. I mean, like, I think everyone has to behave the same. I mean, whatever happened in the past, like they gotta get this together. Because the thing is, I'm like Richard Dawkins. Like people used to talk about Richard Dawkins, like kind of like I'm talking about Matt now. But I never really like. There are a few times where Richard Dawkins was on some bullshit. Like there have been a few things, but it's very rare, and it's because Richard Dawkins, what he would do, is he would have formal debates with people, but he would let them finish. He would engage with people, and he would use very mild language. Actually, he would just say things like, like God is a capriciously malevolent bully, like things, and that would just piss people off, and they would have that reaction to him. But if you actually look at what he was saying, he was very civil almost all the time, and like the people he would go after were like people in the Vatican or people who were high ranking, like people in the Creation Museum or something.
Mm-hmm.
That I think is fine, and he is very angry a lot of the time because he's been dealing with those people, like you said, for a long time. But what Matt does is he takes his encyclopedia of logical fallacies and he just beats regular plebs over the head with it when they call him on the phone. And I'm like, dude, like I was like in that group like 5 years ago. Wait, hold on, let me think. It wasn't 5. It was like 8 years ago. I was in that like Christian group, and I'm like, if I would have called Matt and he would have talked to me like that, I would probably never have become an atheist. Like he's just going against the thing because it's just, I don't know. There's a difference between being firebrand and not backing down on what you say, and not backing away from your point, and just being an asshole with how you go about it. Who's like all theatrics. That's my issue. But like, you're right that this kind of was laid down by them. But it's kind of the problem with like, the newer Democrats and the older Democrats. Like the newer Democrats are saying, okay, we have the power to do these things now. Let's try and get these things done. And a lot of the older Democrats are saying, sit down, little boy. Don't quote the deep magic to me, which I was there when it was written. They're like giving us that, right? And it's like okay, I'm sorry that things are different now, but you gotta keep going. You know what I mean? Did I lose you?
No.
Oh, okay.
I was being quiet thinking.
Oh, yeah. I do think that though, and like I'm not just trying to beat up on Matt Dillon, and like we have gone completely off topic now, which is fine. Like, this is a discussion. It's like a podcast. We're kind of talking about like how to counter bad ideas, I guess, and like the importance of having a genuine discussion which is how we kind of got on it. But yeah, like there is this kind of thing where it's like, well, we're the older people, and we know it's like, no, sometimes the older people are, to use the T.J. Kirk phrase, the ball and chain on the ankle of progress, And I think if he cannot bring himself to not shout every time someone says that they believe in God, and I'm being hyperbolic, of course, but he should be like he should be a horse carriage driver, or maybe he should work in a compact disc factory, or something like that. Just something that doesn't make him just angry all the time. Actually, working in a compact disc factory probably would make you angry all the time. That's probably not a good job for Matt. He should be an interpretive dance person or something. Something where he's not just constantly driving the cars into the ground, and I know you probably don't agree with me. I'm sorry.
No. I think that you make a very valid point about how he communicates and the branding that he brings to a fairly significant portion of the population.
Mm-hmm.
But bringing it back round to the original topic of censorship and corporate say-so in content,
Mm-hmm.
if I call it the Anne Boleyn principle, because she wanted to marry Henry VIII. She wanted to be queen. So she helped orchestrate a system that allowed her to usurp and essentially depose Catherine, so she could be queen. She allowed the British monarch to obtain a divorce. Well, that cost her her head. So she orchestrated her own undoing and her own destruction because she couldn't see the forest for the trees, and she couldn't think long game. Well, what precedent will this set?
Mm-hmm.
And the precedent she set killed her, literally.
Yeah.
So I think that I think that censorship and how I want to use the right word here, sensitivity is largely led by the left. Let's face it, the right really doesn't care about such things unless it pertains to
things they don't care about. Certain first century carpenters, when you make fun of them, they suddenly turn into like super libs. But I generally agree with you though.
Yes. I mean, they're not the most socially conscious people on the planet. So a lot of this awareness and sensitivity is spearheaded by more left-leaning people and groups. So if these movements are successful in censoring content or critiquing ideas or stopping the conversation altogether, one day, maybe not next week, maybe not next year, maybe not in 30 years, but one day, the principle that we laid down for what is acceptable to talk about and what is acceptable and okay to ban is going to come back and bite us in the ass.
Yeah.
You know, maybe right now, Steven Crowder will get taken off of YouTube. But who knows? In 15 years, we might be having this conversation about Matt Dillahunty. Are we allowed to watch or discuss or post things from the ACA? So I think we have to think about the precedent that we're setting, kind of like when, at the risk of going on another rabbit trail, I see a lot of memes about Christians. Imagine if your taxpayer money went to funding Muslim schools, or imagine if mosques were tax exempt and like they replaced Christianity with Islam. How would you feel about that? I think as freethinkers and humanists and just people, we have to think about, this is my opinion, here's my opposition. I think this ought to happen to my opposition because I think their ideas are dangerous. But how would that play out if my ideas were on the chopping block? How would I feel about it then? So it gives us the immediate perspective of, oh shit, I might be actively persecuting somebody just because they have a different opinion than me. It might not be a dangerous opinion, it's just different. So I think that's where we have to differentiate different from dangerous.
Yeah. And I know that you 100% were not doing this. I did want to bring something else up, though, because this is like another avenue of caveat. I do see a lot of people, too. I mean, okay, first I'll kind of, like, agree with what you said, because, like, I'm glad you said that, because, like, with Matt Dillahunty, if YouTube said to him, you're being so mean, we're taking your videos down, I'd be like, no, you're not. No. I would never want them to do that. I want him to be up so I can criticize him in the comments section and annoy the shit out of him so he'll stop doing it. That's what I want. You know, I want them to stay up so we can have a conversation. I would much rather be able to say, hey, Matt, you're an asshole, than, you know, them to be like, actually, Matt's an asshole, so hey, he doesn't get to have videos anymore. You know, so, like, what you say is very valid, because then, like, down the line, and not to use a slippery slope fallacy, but, I mean, is it even a fallacy at this point? Because it's just kind of what's happening, and it's like, well, what if we don't like this anymore? You know, so yeah, I think you're right about that. But the caveat too is I hear a lot of people doing this thing where, and let me know if you've heard this too, where it's like, no matter what the topic is, people are like pretending to be above the fray. Like, well, they just have different opinions. Like, for example, when people got mad at J.K. Rowling for being like overtly anti-trans, I saw this one channel that was like, oh, she just has a different opinion than you. You don't get so mad, you lib, you know what? Don't get so angry. It's like, no, it's more complicated than that. You know, it's not just I like red and you like blue. You know, it's actual harmful things you're saying sometimes. You know what I mean?
Yes. And that's where we have the conversations of that was a hurtful statement and this is why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where I think that we bring in people who are actually affected by those harmful statements and say and have them say, this is problematic for me personally and this is why. Not again, this is I hesitate. I probably won't even go down this rabbit trail because it can have some bad endings. But when people get offended for other people,
oh yes, yes.
It's like, this doesn't even affect you. This has no bearing on your life, and the people who you say are offended are okay with it. It was, you know, maybe like it was a Jimmy Fallon joke.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when individuals get offended for other people, just get a hobby. Do something productive. Do something you enjoy, because you're making my life more difficult than it has to be. You're making everybody's life more difficult than it has to be. Just unwad your underwear and just relax. It's a joke. Things are allowed to be funny. If you don't find it funny, then turn it off. But unless it's harming somebody or the target of that joke is offended or hurt or maligned, just shut up. Change the channel, turn off the video, do something besides get mad for somebody who otherwise is not mad.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that slightly. By the way, I love how gender neutral like the unwad your underwear was. Like that, I love that. It was just.
I'm trying. Okay.
It was so. It was not gender specific at all. It didn't specify a kind of underwear or a kind of plumbing. It was just like, unwad your garment, sir or madam, or whatever pronoun.
I haven't sworn as much.
What'd you say?
And if you notice, I haven't sworn as much.
Oh.
I'm trying.
Yeah. I figure, you know, it's like we're talking about J.K. Rowling and anti-trans things and neo-Nazis, so I'm just like, fuck it. You know, like, when it comes to that, I was like, we're just gonna, it's like I don't know who we're not gonna piss off at this point, but, you know, I respect you not swearing as much.
As much.
Yes, as much. I wanted to say, though, like, as far as the whole, like, J.K. Rowling thing, I'm going to recommend 2 videos to anyone listening, which is, I don't know exactly what they're called, and I apologize. Maybe I'll link them in the doobly-doo. But Jesse Gender and Council of Geeks both have done a couple good videos on J.K. Rowling and that whole issue. So if anyone was curious about, like, breaking down the debacle and, like, what happened and why J.K. Rowling is on some bullshit, those are some good videos to watch. But as far as like the being offended for someone, I can kind of see both sides of it, because on the one hand, I think monolithic thinking about a group can happen on both sides, because you have the one hand who thinks like, okay, this is something I'm gonna make a joke about. This whole group is like this, and sometimes like they're not really joking. It's just like the joke is based on the assumption that the whole group is like the same. But then you have people who are like offended by it, who think that like this is offensive to all black people or something, and that's thinking like in a monolithic way. But then you have like the third group of people who are like, you know, kind of what you just said, like, why are you getting offended? for this, and I think that has some merit, but on the other hand, it's like with the Jimmy Fallon joke, for example, a lot of people probably found that offensive who were black, and a lot of people probably didn't. The issue is thinking that like the whole group thinks a certain way, and like the joke was inherently offensive. It's like no, if whether something is offensive is completely subjective. It depends on how you define offensive. Like some people, like obviously that the joke there was like the stereotypes, but I did like for example, I didn't think Jimmy Fallon actually thought those things. I thought he was making fun of him. So like that's why I didn't find it offensive, you know. So that's just a whole tree of nuance there, but just something I wanted to say. I mean, interestingly, I found too that like I don't remember where I heard this, but like this could be untrue. I think it's true though. Like with the Speedy Gonzalez character, like a lot of people who were Hispanic like liked that character. He thought he was like it was like oh you know there's a character who's kind of representing like Hispanic people who's a hero, and there were a lot of other people who were like no that's offensive to Hispanic people, so we have to take it off the air. And then a lot of them pushed back, like, no, we like Speedy Gonzalez. But I'm sure there were a lot of other Hispanic people who were like, no, that's offensive to me. So, you know, it's you're never going to get the same thing for everyone. Which is why I think it's bad to just take videos down. But anyway.
Well, I think largely because I'm a cis white lady, in the circles that I associate with are cis white women. I get really tired of the white people I encounter, and when they see a person of color, oh, I voted for Obama. Like, the fuck? No
Yeah.
one. Okay, no. Stop. You're not... It's okay.
Right.
You don't have to be that. You don't have to do the hey, I'm Susie's dad. You into the movie, son? Oh yeah. Obama's a great guy, isn't he? Yeah, yes sir. You don't have to find that. You don't have to try that hard to find a connection with somebody who's different than you. Just talk to them normally, like a person.
Be normal, be genuine. If you say some dumb shit, they'll probably tell you, you know?
Yes.
And I think I should probably say this here, too. A lot of people listening, and there probably won't be a lot of people listening, but a lot of people listening might not know that I'm a multiracial person. Like, I have one white parent and one black parent. So I do look non-white. Although I have had some people think that I'm not. I had some people think I was white in like the winter when my skin isn't as dark. So but people do that to me. They're like, I'll walk up to them and be like, "Sup, brother?" And I'm like, "Who are you? And why are you doing this to me?" But it's just like it's assumptions about like your cultural background, and like I get it from black people too, because they'll walk up and be like, "What's up, my N-word?" And I'm like, I don't really use that like that. I don't, but okay, hi. I'm not gonna like snub someone when they're trying to be friendly, but it's just like for a long time that's like something I was very uncomfortable with because, I was in a lot of spaces where like you do not say that word for any reason, like mostly because I went to a predominantly white school where like no one was saying that word unless it was like to hurt me. So, there was a lot of cultural nuance there, and people just get really cringy sometimes when they see you. Like, I can clearly remember being, like, in elementary school. And, like, I said one time, and if this kid is listening, I'm so sorry. Because, like, I do not hold him to this. He was, like, 8 when he said it to me, so it's fine, right? But, we were talking about Harry Potter, and I said that I had a crush on Hermione, because what kid didn't have a crush on Hermione, right? And he's like, "You'd probably like her better if she was black, though." And I was like, what the hell does that mean? Yes, if you were listening to this, I forgive you, though. Like I said, we were little kids. But, it's just, there's a lot of ignorance that goes into it. And again, it's like the guy you were talking about. It's important to have those discussions, because like I've talked to older people who said very progressive things and said very un-PC phrasing when I had like an older person say to me once, "It's like I just hated that back in my day everyone was discriminating against those Negroes," and I was like, "Oh, oh." That's, well, but I didn't snub her for it. You know, I was just kind of like, yeah, I focused on what she was saying and not her like syntax. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
that seemed to make more sense in that scenario.
But she was sincere.
Yes, um, and maybe I would have, maybe I could have. It would have been more responsible for me. Like, I see what you're saying, but we don't really say this anymore because it's considered offensive. A lot of people say offensive things and they don't even know they're considered offensive. So maybe I should have said that, but we were having a heart to heart, and I didn't feel like being that guy in that moment. So,
I think offensive has a bad connotation to it. I mean, while we're talking about syntax and
You think what has a bad connotation? You cut out. I'm sorry.
Offense or offended or offending.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm offended. That has a connotation to it now.
Yeah.
It's associated with cancel culture and social justice warriors, and it's like it has a negative connotation to it. So I think that has to also is something to consider when we're talking about delicate, nuanced issues. As like we have to get to quote my dear Eric, we have to get our definitions straight.
Who's your dear Eric?
Eric Murphy from Talk Heathen.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
I fucking hate him too. No, I'm just kidding. I don't even know who that is. They're just going a whole ass rant against him too. Yeah. No.
Well, I mean, we have to get our definitions straight. We have to get on the same page.
Yes.
And there are plenty of old people who are going to continue using antiquated language until someone says, I appreciate your sentiment and your progressiveness, but those words are harmful now. Those words actively hurt other people.
Yeah.
And then they find a new word. And everything's hunky-dory. No one you can't tell somebody you can't in order to grow as people, we have to be able to say that language is problematic for a multitude of reasons. Here's a reason why, and here's an alternative.
Yeah.
Within reason.
Right. Yeah. I think that's true. And it's. I see what you're saying, because a lot of people are like, man, everyone's so offended by everything. When did everyone get so offended? And it's like everyone thinks that until they're offended by something, and then it's, well, that's just insensitive. So it's like everyone has that double standard thing going. So yeah, the word offensive has had some bad connotations, but you're right. Like some words are actually offensive for a specific reason. I mean, a lot of words have like racist history too. Although I will say this too, I have I'll have a lot of beef with people who refuse to let words evolve. Like if there's a word that had a racist past, but it doesn't mean that anymore, and it hasn't meant that for years. People who try to resurrect that old meaning, and they're like, no, we can't use that word anymore because it had a racist past. And I'm like, well, now you've just made it racist again. Like when it was going the other direction. Like we have a lot of words in English that have a very bad past that like no one even is aware of that, and they're not really hurting people anymore. I think we have to strike that balance of letting words evolve, like the N-word, for example. A lot of older people, like a lot of older black people specifically, don't like that word, understandably, because it was like a word of oppression for like a really, really, really long time, and it still is to some extent. But a lot of like younger black people are using it as like a word of camaraderie. And a lot of the older people don't even want them to do that. And it's like, well, if you don't allow them to do that, then it's never going to not be offensive, Like it's a difficult balance. And by the way, the reason I'm not saying the word is because that's one of those words that YouTube will just ban you for saying it, no matter what the reason was, even if you're quoting somebody. So yeah, I'm not going to do that. You know, I'm already trying not to get this video taken down. But yeah, so nuance and shit, you know. I'm sorry, that was more of like a rant than an actual discussion.
No, you made lots of good points there. And I think it goes back to what you said earlier, how tradition or the older generation is the ball and chain of progress.
Yeah. And a lot of it is with good intent too. Like that's not necessarily a scenario where like someone is trying to hold things back. It's just like the YouTube thing. Like a lot of these people have good intentions. They're just not allowing things to go the way they probably should. You know, I did want to bring something else up because we actually kind of snickered about this, but we never brought it up. It's kind of funny, like YouTube accidentally taking down Republican content because it thinks it's Nazi content. Like, something about that is just really funny. I don't know why. Like, obviously, I don't want them taking all this shit down, but, like, just the fact that they're, like, the fact that that was said so formally. Like, I wonder why that is. Why is it that right-wing content sounds like Nazi content? Could it be because Nazi content is right-wing content? You know, not that they're the same, but...
Yeah. But the simple fact that they are more worried about that Republicans are more worried about censorship accidentally flagging their content and taking it down versus personal introspection about what is it about my ideology and rhetoric that is associated with active listed hate groups, and how do I remedy this issue? It's not, well, let me fix this problem. It's, well, I might be accidentally affected by this problem if it's allowed to become a policy.
Yeah.
Priorities, sir or madam?
Yeah. Like, oops, I was accidentally a whole ass Nazi, according to the algorithm. Oops. You know, what do I do about that? Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of goofy. Yeah. Oh, I also read that, like, they're taking down, like, they took down David Duke's channel, and, like, Alex Jones's channel. I just don't know what to think about a lot of that, because I've seen David Duke speak a few times. Like, David Duke is not a good person.
No.
But, I don't know that I've ever seen him, like, actively harass a specific person or organize violence. I would be surprised. I mean, especially since he was involved with the Klan. I think he would probably be careful not to do that because he doesn't want his content taken down, and he already has like a lot of people watching him. And like the same with Alex Jones. Like, I'm not equating the two of them, but like Alex Jones obviously is like one of the big angry speakers for the right wing, and he's just turn to the freaking frogs gay.
That was really good.
Oh, thank you. You know, actually, you know what? I'm gonna backpedal a little bit, Alex Jones. I have seen him say some stuff like, "We need to take our liberty back," guns and shit. Like, yeah, maybe he's kind of in that category of, this is sounding a little Trumpy on the capital E, you know. So maybe not that I'm making light of that. That was not funny. What happened at the Capitol? I don't think that was funny. It's just, you know, I could see it with him, but you know, I really don't want them to take down someone like Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro or Dave Rubin. Does Dave Rubin have a strong opinion on anything though? I'm gonna take him down. Like, I'm not going to turn this into a Dave Rubin hate fest because there's already been a lot of that. But you get what I'm saying, right? I don't know that a lot of these people have content that really should be taken down like that. I have to apologize to you, Katie, because you have to keep in mind I'm very used to recording by myself and editing, so like I don't usually have to tell myself to shut up if someone else isn't speaking, and I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Probably not censorship. Call me a traitor, but not you. But you know.
Yeah. I think that it has to do with you know, at the risk of sounding like a free market capitalist, letting the market go, letting the conversation flow, letting things happen. It might not always be pretty or ideal. There might be some hiccups. But that is, again, where we have to strike the balance between how much freedom are you willing to give up for security?
Right, yeah.
I mean, how much of your free speech are you willing to give up to silence someone who you might not agree with?
Yeah.
Because that's going to bite you in the ass too. May not be tomorrow, may not be next week, but it will.
I'm just chuckling because I'm having flashbacks to like the Department of Homeland Security and the NSA. Like, oh no, these are like the same conversations they had before they started like being like, oh, is this the Constitution? Blowtorch,
Yeah, I think that was actually my first draft because it reminded me a lot of the Patriot Act, where it gave the NSA the blatant ability to overtly look at the books that people were checking out at the library.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that sounds silly, but why would you check out the anarchist cookbook in the first place? That just seems kind of like a amateur move there.
Right.
But I mean, how much freedom are you willing to give up to be safe, and how much freedom are you willing? How much security are you willing to give up to be free yourself?
Yes, or quote unquote free.
Yes,
and
because if you demand that Apple help unlock a terrorist iPhone, well, guess what? That unlocks your iPhone too.
Right. Yeah.
So people don't, like you said, people don't think about it until it affects them. People don't think about it until they are restricted or canceled or banned. And it's just the 2020 version of shunning. I mean, we've gone past the point of we voted and you have to leave the village and you can never come back.
Right.
But it's equivalent. You're not allowed to interact with any of your friends or family on any of the social media sites because you're banned. Because you had an opinion.
Shun the non-believer. Shun. Yeah.
Yeah. You're not allowed to engage with other people and potentially come to the conclusion that you were wrong by interacting with other people and learning and expanding your horizons, because we don't want somebody to get offended. And I was raised very conservatively, and I don't have a lot of those tenets left, but I still have some. I distinctly remember when I came home one day, I was in like the second, third grade, and we had just learned about angles. There's obtuse and acute angles. Well, I was not a small child. I've had weight issues all of my life. And a girl said, "Wow, Katie, you're really obtuse." Because there was acute and obtuse angles. And she was, of course, a smaller girl, and it hurt my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was nothing I could do at that moment to alter myself at that point. But then she kept harassing me about other stuff, and she was just kind of a dick, and she wouldn't play with me on the playground. And she got all of her friends to not play during recess, and it was a bad situation. And I went home, and my mom's like, and I told my mom what happened. She said, "Well, what were you doing? Were you doing anything that made them not want to play with you?" Said, "I don't think so." Okay, well, then just. But her point was, think about your contribution to their opinion of you. Are you assisting them in creating a image of you that might not be favorable? So, all of that to say, if somebody is calling you a racist, don't dig yourself even deeper into that racist hole and just retreat to your echo chamber of affirmative voices. Think about it. Talk to a person of color. Just examine your own self. If someone's calling you a sexist, do the same thing. Talk to a woman. Talk to other people and kind of gauge yourself and get some perspective before instantly getting offended.
Yeah.
And I mean, are you contributing to someone's negative opinion of you? If someone's being a dick, they're being a dick. But there's an off chance that somebody might be trying to tell you, hey, here's an issue I've noticed, and I care about you as a fellow human being. This behavior is suboptimal.
Yeah, and none of that can happen if we just cast people away.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's true. I think we're very much in agreement about this. It's like,
as we talk about echo chambers, we are in one.
Yeah, we are like totally like, yes, that's a great idea. Tell me more about the great idea. Yes, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Yeah, but I mean,
except when it comes to Matt Dillahunty.
Oh yeah. But even with that, we're having a civil discussion. It's like we're just not angry enough people to have an interesting, heated discussion. No, but that's. I think it's interesting that, like you said, the thing about like the capitalists with our ideas rhetoric. Basically, we're like, oh yeah, we want a free market of ideas. I don't think that makes you sound too much like a hardcore capitalist, because I don't think either one of us are like, yes, we want a free market and no regulations on healthcare and the fire department and the police. Like, we're not saying that. Like, but we both turn into like hardcore, like laissez-faire capitalists when it comes to ideas, I think. Basically.
Well, I think that, yes, the communication, at least interpersonal communication, works best when we let it flow naturally. But caveat, asterisk, everything else, there's always going to be that one asshole who necessitates the use of a sign that says, do not cross, do not lean over this fence, this is a mountaintop, do not do this, please do not, because somebody was an idiot and they did something stupid.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always going to be those people who necessitate signs and warnings and cautionary labels and moderators, whether they be legal moderators or social parameters. But there's always going to be people who push and see, just how far they can go. Or they just want to do something stupid because it's the internet and you can be anonymous. So we're never going to be completely free of regulation, but there's no need to tack on extra safeguards just so that no one is ever offended at all and everything is good all the time.
Yeah, so you can make more money.
Yes.
You keep the advertisers happy. Yeah. Speaking of canceling too, you're talking about like people, like basically all the unwarranted searches and seizures. I find it really hard to believe that the federal government got a search warrant for every single American. That would probably take some time. But the federal government canceled the fuck out of Edward Snowden and Julian Assange. Speaking of cancel culture, like those dudes got canceled. They got canceled with the entire weight of the government. when they said something the government didn't like. I don't know. I just thought that was funny to think about. I mean, it's not funny to think about.
Yeah, it's an interesting, for a country that's the land of the free and home of the brave.
Mm-hmm.
They sure don't like it when someone stands up for freedom and is brave enough to do it. I mean, Snowden saw a problem, and he could not, with integrity, let that slide. That's why we have confidential reporting, whether it be in government or healthcare or whatever. That's why we have hotlines. That's why, if you see something, say something.
Yeah.
He saw something, he said something, and we said, oh, yeah, we didn't want you to say that.
Yeah, don't say that particular thing.
Right, that's not how that works. He saw something wrong, he spoke up, and, I mean, he fucked.
Yeah, they threw the book at him. The book certainly wasn't the Constitution, but it was a book. They threw it at him, and he had to flee. Yeah, I did a report on him when I was in school, but I never understood this whole thing of like. And I'm gonna wrap up soon. Don't worry. Like, I'm not gonna just like start a whole ass other topic, but like, I never understood this whole thing of like, you do something wrong. I tell people you did something wrong that deserve to know it, and now it's your fault that people are mad at me. It's like, no, it's your fault that people are mad at you because you're the one who did it. I just reported it. It's,
right.
They're just mad because they knew they shouldn't have done this. It's like, should we light the Constitution on fire? Yeah, let's light the Constitution on fire. And then it was just like, hey, they're lighting the Constitution on fire. Like, oh shit, now we gotta light him on fire too. And it's like, oh, this is supposed to be our representative government, man. I don't know.
Yeah, and if we regulate social communication and interaction to the point that some of these companies are wanting to make everything good and perfect all the time, we have a lot of Snowdens, and it's going to blow up in our faces.
Yeah. That's a good note to end on.
I think so.
Yeah, but nice positive note. But look at you, like, tying it back to the topic when I just went totally off the rails.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Like, you tied it back. You actually did the work. I was just like, hey, let's go over here, right? No one's been here yet. You just tied it back. But yeah, like, I think we've covered this pretty thoroughly. But like, I'm so appreciative that you like came to do this. Like, I've never done this before. This is much longer than I anticipated it to be. That's what she said. No, it is though. It was I don't know, this was a lot lengthier than I thought it would be, but like, I think we kind of kept bringing topics back to this, and I don't really think there's any other thing to talk about, but like, there's a lot of other issues and topics that like I'm inspired to talk about, like, on this thing. Maybe I'll give it a name. I don't know what the name is. This is just the Amorphous Our Philosophy Is podcast at this point. But but hey, if there's ever something like newsworthy that you want to talk about, I'd be happy to have you back if you'd be interested.
Sure. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. But I guess for our audience, we will say goodbye for now. So Katie, thank you so much again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been real. It's been awesome.
Yes.
I laughed. I cried. We almost got demonetized. So it was great. But to everyone, thank you for watching. And until next time, I will see y'all next time. So bye-bye.